come back to messaging. And then they closed, then they did an offering, and then they closed and invited us all to come to the seance, which is an extension of the service. So we went to upstairs and we sat in a circle in a dark room with the candles in the middle. And the two ministers said that they would be conducting this seance. They asked how many people had never been to a seance. Just a few of us raised our hands. They said, well, you see, there's no table here. You know, we know you were expecting a table, and everybody holding their hands on the table, but that's not what we do. Go back and tell your friends. And yeah, that's right. And but we are going to try to commune with the other side. And then she said, and any other mediums in the room, please do not go into a trance. And then she said, and you may, if you have a message, you are free to pass it on. We'll do this together. Lights are out, we're sitting there, and the Reverend says to a woman, says, I see a young woman, a teenager, standing by your left shoulder. May she approach you. And the woman said, really, she's frightened? Yes. And the medium says, the Reverend medium said, did you lose a teenage daughter? And this woman burst into tears and said, yes. And the medium says, well, she's here, and gave her a message, and the mother said, well, is she all right? Is she all right? And the medium says, she's just fine. She's just fine. Then she went, then another medium spoke and said to my husband, I see a very tall man, older, looks like might have been your father, who's in standing like a military man. Yes, he has brass buttons on. And he has a message, may he approach. And my husband said, I don't know. My father was just in the Navy just a year or so. Sort of waved it off. And then I said to my husband, don't say that. Your father was the captain of the sanitation police. He walked up and down parades with his brass buttons. Oops. Because if you, this is the thing, if you, in their minds, if these spirits cannot come to you unless you accept them. Well, that's another piece of this. And if you send them back, then they're not going to talk to you. And then they said to me that they had an elderly woman who was small, very tiny, standing at my left shoulder, and that she had bright red hair, was quite opinionated, looked like a grandmother, and had a very, was very self-involved. She said she was cute as a button. And did I know anybody who fits that description that what might have been a grandmother type? And I said, well, my grandmother was 5'1", red-headed, quite opinionated, and cute, and very involved in how she was. So she gave me a message from my grandmother. Well, this was all very surprising. And everybody in the room was surprised about something or another because it was that specific. But we left sort of still holding on to explanations, right? Explanations. What had happened. But it became clear that just as the Shakers believed, just as the Sufis believed, everybody in that church believed, the ministers believed, they're highly trained, they go through a very formal training process. And so this idea of spiritualism, the idea that there's not this black and white demarcation between life and death, is very much alive and it's certainly prevalent in all of the Hinduism. And I went back to the Bible, first Old and New Testament. It's certainly prevalent there. So this is, you know, it cast and gave me a whole new sense of point of view that I hadn't really had before, hadn't thought was such a big deal. But it was a big deal once, and it may be a bigger deal than we can imagine, partly because we don't tell each other, you know, what's happening. So I'll open it up to you all. You've read the readings, and Jerry and I are happy to just, I don't know, we're not going to be a Q&A, it's going to be a, talk to us.
Ruth, you mentioned when you were at the service.
Yeah, I'm going to get a next.
Messaging, but you said you were going to come back to that.
Yes. What they did in the service was to give us a little taste of what it was going to be in the seance. So what they call messaging is standing there, being a receptacle for the spirit, and then telling you what the spirit is saying and asking you if they could approach. And they're really, you know, quite a thing to see. Civilized, polite thing to do. Yes, it's full of all those imaginations. Yes.
One thing that I've always had kind of, the word question is not really 100% right, Jerry, but I'm thinking, Mother and me has always kind of perplexed me, and I haven't read enough, so I don't really know how much her participation was in spiritualism, how much she encouraged people to just, as you were saying, to sort of relax and go with it, and you know, be pure in mind and body and spirit, so that you can feel one with everything that you're doing. Was that something that she was necessarily a great proponent of, or was it the entire Shaker concept was that way, that was beyond her?
I think that, you know, I meant to say that most Christians, I guess, think about the afterlife.
Right.
You know, about the next world. I mean, we use that phrase, you know, preparation. And I have to say, the Shakers also have a phrase, working out your soul salvation in the next world. Well, or they don't say that actually. In a world of spirits, I think they would say. But the Shakers have the other world. It's not the next world. It's just the other world, and they're blended. There's a song that says, you know, that heavens and earth are blended. An image they use a lot. And it's, I think Anne Lee was somebody who very much lived in both worlds. And there are testimonies recorded by those who knew her. That, and I wish I could quote this one, you know, but it's basically, she's talking to somebody who came to visit her to get to know her, and she says something like, "There is the ugliest spirit sitting on your shoulder I've ever seen." You know, it's like things like that. So you know that she's, you know, there's some visions there going on. And she wasn't asking if they could approach her or not. You've got an ugly spirit on your shoulder. You need to get rid of that. So she very much, I think, was in both worlds. And when you read Shaker diaries a lot, or Shaker accounts of meetings, you just keep reading along, and all at once you realize that you just flipped over to the other world. I mean,
Right.
it was a normal conversation between two people. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. Father William said that he was the thing, and all at once you click that Father William's been dead for 50 years, and then it goes right back to somebody you know is alive. So sometimes it's just almost seamless, and I picture her as very seamless in the blended world. Not constantly, but I mean, I think when she was in, you know, that vision state, I think that's sort of how it comes down from what records we have. I mean, that's always sort of edited records with her.
So, and that really explains the effort, or you know, the rules about keeping the sexes separate and celibacy, and because you wanted to get as far away from your physical body as you could to stay